It's kind of like our cry or our trumpet cry, if you will, to wake up the world. Do, 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 do. And what we mean by that is to bring teachings and practices that inspire spiritual awakening everywhere.
Okay, welcome to the show. I'm joined here by Tami Simon. So Tami is the founder of SoundsTrue, a multimedia publishing company with more than 110 employees and a library of more than 3,000 titles featuring some of the world's leading teachers and visionaries of our time. People like Eckharte Tolle, Pema Chodron, Gabor Mate, and Michael Singer. Now, when somebody sees what you've accomplished with SoundsTrue, Tami, they'll probably think, I could never do that. But from doing a bit of research for this interview, I discovered that you actually had you started quite small with this project. So could you maybe tell us what the first draft of SoundsTrue looked like back in the day?
Sure. Well, Niall, first of all, great to be with you, and thank you for your genuine interest. And back in the day, we're going way back. We're going back to 1984, 1985, when I first started SoundsTrue, April 15th, 1985. Which was my father's birthday. And my father had passed away 6 months previous to that. And I had a small inheritance. And the inspiration came from that small inheritance. I mean, like $50,000, which in US dollars, in today's world, that would be like $200,000. So for someone who was 21 years old, it felt like a lot of money, but also like use it wisely, invest it in yourself. And what I saw out in the world was this use of high-speed cassette duplication equipment. Now, you may be thinking, what are you talking about? What is a cassette? Maybe you know what a little cassette tape is. But anyway, I saw these machines. You took one master recording, put it in a slot, and then there could be as many hookups as you could carry these big machines with you, and it would make copies in 3 minutes. And that was my original inspiration, was to go and record terrific teachers and right there on the spot, make high-speed cassette copies for the participants. And I would give the author a copy of the master. So I'm like, here you go. Here's a copy of this professionally recorded program. You didn't have to pay for that. And then I would sell the cassettes and I would give the author a share of the revenue after I covered my costs. And part of the big motivation here was that I wanted to go to these lectures. And I, couldn't afford the weekend workshop fees. And so this gave me a chance to go to sit in the back of the room where I could listen and learn, but I also didn't have to really participate in the same way, which I enjoyed. I liked my kind of observer seat. And I, would come away at the end with master recordings and cash.
Well, that is quite a sweet deal. And I know you weren't the biggest fan of academia. So it sounds like you were almost able to create your own education here and make it a very exciting and rewarding process, so that's fantastic.
Well, it wasn't that, it's interesting because I love learning. And the thing that I discovered in the academic world was that the kind of learning that I loved, which is learning that I could process in an embodied way, that I could feel, that I could know in my own experience, at the time especially wasn't all that welcome in academic circles, where it felt like there was a requirement to be much more analytical about other people's ideas. And I was really interested in something like the personal spiritual journey or the mystical journey or the path of direct revelation, whatever language you want to use for what you know in your own inner mystical knowing. So that was the kind of learning I was interested, which wasn't necessarily welcome in academia at the time.
For sure. Now, I've heard you describe yourself as the fringe of the fringe. All right. Now, do you think, I don't, maybe necessary is a strong word here, but do you think it helps if you want to make a meaningful impact or a meaningful change in this world to almost be an outsider?
Well, first of all, I think that comment, the fringe of the fringe, tells you more about my psychology than perhaps the real facts of the matter. And what I mean by that is that's how I felt inside. And I think I've always felt quite like an outlier or someone who didn't fit the status quo of the culture. So that's how I felt inside. Whether it was true or not, I don't really know. That would take a different kind of lens. Now, in terms of what it takes, I think feeling some kind of inner pressure, inner imperative, it creates a kind of pressure cooker inside. So often, I mean, maybe great ideas and great inspiration and great motivation can just come for some people from like an easy breezy kind of thing. But what I found in my life is that there are certain times when I'm like, oh my God, it is so intense in here right now, so demanding. I have got to come up with a way out. And one of the things I've been reflecting a lot on is how intense adversity can often lead to spiritual discoveries. So sometimes it's people who have, serious terminal illness diagnoses, or people who are suffering in all kinds of ways. And through that suffering, something breaks through, because it has to, because you're so cornered. And I think that was part of what was happening for me. I mean, I felt a kind of desperation when I dropped out of the academic world to make good of my life. And so there was a lot of inner pressure. And I do think sometimes good ideas come from that kind of inner pressure.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, can you tell me about the role that prayer has played in your life? And can you tell me about the significance of the phrase, I think it's God, I'm willing to do your work. Show me what it is.
Sure. Well, these are two big questions, Niall, and I'll try to be brief. The first one, I'll answer your second question. God, I'm willing to do your work. Back when I was 21, that was the sentence that occurred to me at that time, because you have to remember, here I am, not just a college dropout, but there had been a lot of expectations in my family that I would do something meaningful. And I had those expectations for myself. I had those expectations for myself because I really wanted to help what I saw as, and still see as, a suffering world. And I was like, I want to do something. So inside, I didn't know what to do. So I said this sentence, God. And to me, what that meant was that there was some type of benevolent work, holy work, good work, service work that would actually be mine to do. And that it didn't matter to me if it was easy or hard, famous or not, big or small. I just wanted to do the work that I came here to do as a person. So that was what was under that prayer. And I said it again and again for a long time. And I think it helped kind of focus me on what really mattered to me. Now, the role of prayer in general, it's interesting because I don't think it's like quote unquote prayer that really matters. It's the connection. It's the bridge. It's the contact with something that's beyond your personal mental power. It's the idea that there are bigger forces at work. There are, whether it's other beings and presences, or whether it's just the power of life itself that we can contact, where we're not this isolated little, like a board. What do you call it when you play a game like pool? I can't think of the word. Billiard ball. Yeah, like we're not this little isolated billiard ball trying to make everything happen in our life, because that kind of capacity and power is so limited. One little billiard ball trying to do its thing. But through some kind of bridge or connection or contact, something, you're suddenly in touch with all of the power of life. And if you want to call that quote unquote God, you can. You can really call it anything. You can just say, life, let me do the work through this vessel, through this instrument that I'm uniquely wired and capable of expressing, that's good and benevolent. And I think creating that kind of link up, that's what connects each one of us to a reservoir of possibility that is just absolutely huge and amazing. And so I think that's the key act. And you don't have to call it quote unquote prayer. You could call it relaxing into the power of life.
And what's interesting about your story, Tami, is that after you did that, some things started happening, and you could call it coincidence or whatever, but it seemed quite synchronous that some of these events happened. And I want to get your thoughts on, we're talking here about the divine or that higher power or whatever. It almost seems like it's responsive in some way. And can you maybe tell us about what happened around that time that maybe led to SoundsTrue? Like how did that
Sure.
actually come about?
Sure. And but just one comment here, which is, I think sometimes when we introduce words like divine, or people are like, oh God, I'm going to roll my eyes now. Really? We have, what does that even mean? And that's why I can think of it more just like when you connect and are in conversation, because we're always in conversation, possibly, but sometimes we're not listening to life, all of life. So you're breathing, you're porous, you're interpenetrated by, you're receiving messages, you're, with everything, with what's happening with all of the elements around you, the trees, the skies, the stars, with the people, with the animals, with the messages coming from technology, all of it. That's what I'm talking about. And then you start seeing, oh, well, these are synchronicities. Well, this is you're aligning with the movement of life. And in my own case, I said that prayer for a long time and nothing particularly terrific was happening. I have to be honest with you. And I was getting pretty deflated, but I was determined to keep asking questions. And that's sort of part of my nature. It's like, well, what about this? And what about that? And so I was interviewing people for a public radio show as a volunteer. So this is important too. I was just like, God, I have to follow whatever in me is alive and interested, and I want to learn. And I wanted to learn what this gentleman had. He had crystals in his window. And I wanted to learn about the crystals. Why did he have these 2-foot tall crystals in his window? I'm like, this is crazy. What's he doing with these things? What are they? And I'd walk by, I was barefoot at the time, walk by, and I was like, what's going on? And he and I became friends in that process. So that's interesting too. It's like, oh, these miracles happen. Well, no, actually, I allowed myself to recognize this person, and he recognized me. And we were like, wow, we like each other. Now that's available to anybody, I like you, oh person that I just met, whatever. And so we liked each other. And then we spent time together. And then I shared with him, as I mentioned to you, Niall, that I inherited this small amount of money and I didn't know what to do with it. And he said, why don't you put it in yourself? And I was like, what? What do you mean? Like, what would I do with it? And he just looked at me and he said, Tami, you know what you want to do. You know what you want to do. And when he said that, I thought, no, I don't. Actually, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you for all these hours about things like crystals if I knew what to do with myself. I don't know what to do. But I walked out of his office. And this is where you could say, oh, this synchronous event happened, or this miracle happened, it was certainly a strange event that happened. And the strange event that happened is, first of all, I felt like I was walking above the ground. So that was very odd. What's going on? Why are my feet 5 feet above the ground? That feels very strange. And then I heard a voice. And of course, is that an inner voice, outer voice? I'll never know. And the voice said, disseminate spiritual wisdom. And when I heard that voice and I heard those 3 words, my feet hit the ground again and I started walking. And I felt like I knew that that's what I was supposed to do, and that was the answer to the prayer that I had been asking.
Wow. So it sounds like that was a great source of motivation and power for you moving forward, just like it gave you direction for your life that would organize all sorts of
clarity, because the power in which it came through, it wasn't, most of the time we have these thoughts and like, oh, maybe this would be strategic. Maybe I could do that, or this is a good idea. And then there are things that happen that are like lightning bolts that go through you. You can't question them because they're so strong and you felt them through your whole being. And you're like, that's a thing. And that's the way that moment felt when I heard disseminate spiritual wisdom. It was undeniable, incontrovertible. Yeah.
Very cool. Now, SoundsTrue's mission is to wake up the world. I think that's what it is anyway. What do you see as the purpose of business in the future of our society?
Well, okay. Well, there's a couple things in there. First, it's kind of like our cry or our trumpet cry, if you will, to wake up the world. Do, 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 do. And what we mean by that is to bring teachings and practices that inspire spiritual awakening everywhere. So even as I was talking to you about all of life becoming an expression through a vehicle of us, but us not being a billiard ball. And I've never used that image before, but what occurred to me talking here today, it doesn't really matter. The idea of that being that interconnected web and knowing ourselves like that, that is what spiritual awakening is. That's to me what waking up is. And that's available to all of us because it's our true nature. It's who we actually are. It's images that create this sense of being a separate self. It's ideas that we've formulated. So that's what's meant by that. Wake up the world. And then what's business's role? Well, what's it like to have a business that honors, reflects, and expresses our interdependence? What's that like? What's that like when we're really all rising together, our employees, our vendors, the future? We care about the future. We're working as well for our ancestors, for their good name in the world today. We are their living expression. What are we going to do for them? How do we balance all of the stakeholders in an interdependent way and give our gifts? Like, what's the future of business? We want to give our gifts. That's who we are as people, I believe. When our hearts are open, there's a natural overflow. There's a generosity that occurs in us as people. We're flowing. Woo, I got more. I want to give it. I want to give it. I want to give it. And we want to give our gifts too. And we want to be recognized. And we want to have this kind of natural reciprocity. So, you know, as a business person, I want to serve you. I want to bring you value. I want to make you smile. I want you to go, oh my God, I love that product, that brand, that company, that ethos. I love it. I love it. And then you know, so that's what I think. Yeah. The future businesses will honor and express our interdependence.
Fantastic. Now, just to comment on what you guys actually do. So when I was like 20 years old, I read The Power of Now by Eckharte Tolle, and that created such a massive shift in me that I think has probably led to the work I'm currently doing. You know, so it put me on a completely different trajectory in life. So what you're doing is important. You know, it's helping people to wake up and see things from a different perspective, which then changes their actions, changes what they do in the world. So just keep doing what you're doing. You know, it's super important. So I wanted to ask about some of your kind of philosophy and some of the things you kind of, I suppose, you try and embody through SoundsTrue. And a phrase that I found really resonated with my own experience is that there's no there. And there's nothing at the end, like not there's not at the end, but it's not about the end thing that you're going towards. It's about the process of getting there. And I think there's a really harmful myth that, or not myth, but just a belief that a lot of people carry, especially in the business world, that the ends justify the means. And anytime I have went by that philosophy, it's always led to terrible outcomes, both in the present and what it led to. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, especially since you're an Eckharte Tolle fan or someone who appreciates Eckhart's work, you can say something like there's no there, but there's a whole lot of here. And what I mean by that is we're here. And whoever listens to this is also going to be in the present moment here. Whenever they listen to it. Whenever they listen to it, they'll be here. And to me that means is that we have to make each here, each now moment, utterly true, fabulous, in integrity, heart-filled, right with us, right aligned with us. When we do that, the next moments will also be like that. The moment we trespass that for some future gain, and especially if we trespass our integrity, if we trespass our soul's alignment, anything like that, we'll have to pick up the pieces of that. And it doesn't make sense, especially if your business is standing for something like spiritual wisdom. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to say that the way we get there doesn't matter. No, the process, and this has been my philosophy, it sounds true from the beginning, the process should reflect the values of our products. The process should have as much wisdom in it as our products do.
That's very cool. So it's not the how is as important as the what.
The how is the most important thing.
Interesting. Okay. You mentioned integrity there. What does the word integrity mean to you?
Yeah, it's a word I like. I mean, I know it can sound kind of like moralistic. And even as I said it, it's like, oh God, now she's on her high horse. Like, really, we're going to have to listen to this? I was thinking to myself. But integrity actually means to me something like, you ready for this? An open central channel in the body. It's our backbone. It's our spine. It's the current that runs in us from down deep already in the earth, up through us in front of the spine and up through the top of our head. That is our inner alignment. And that inner alignment is our integrity. It is our integrity. If we're compromised, then we're out of that strong back. We're out of it. And we're wishy-washy. We're all over the place. Like you meet people and you're like, wow, that person's a little squirrely. Like, what does that mean? They're squirrely, or they're oily, or something like that. Like you can feel it's like squishy, or you meet someone and you're like, wow, they are elegant. They're upright. They're noble. Whoa, there's this like natural nobility. That's our integrity.
Very cool. Now, you have worked with some of the world's greatest spiritual teachers, and who is the person, when I say the word integrity, is there anybody that jumps to mind that person had extremely high integrity? Maybe their presence, or does anybody come to mind there?
Yeah, well, it's always hard to name people. However, I will bring one person up, and I think part of it is because of the depth of our friendship. So I know this person in a different kind of way, which is through my work at SoundsTrue. I've had the honor of being able to travel with Adyashanti, who's a spiritual teacher. People call him Adya in his life. And, I started calling him something like Mr. Goodness. And it was just my joke. He never really responded as I said it. But I always felt from him this utter and total transparency and authenticity. And so it was easy to get to know him and to be friends because he was so available through his goodness to connect with me. So I think I know him in his integrity in a more intimate way than perhaps some of the other teachers I've worked with that I've never gotten to know as well.
Interesting. And for you yourself, how do you know when you're out of integrity or out of alignment with what you should be doing?
Well, first of all, I think everybody knows. I think everybody knows. I really don't think I don't think you have to have any kind of special superhuman powers. I think it's our human powers. And I think if you take the time to sit with yourself and listen inside, that's really the only prerequisite. And I think to question and inquire into addictive behaviors of all kinds, because those are ways that we're covering up emotional distress. And that emotional distress can be an indicator that there's something we need to pay attention to, coming back into our own inner alignment, coming back into our own inner self. But if we're constantly, whatever it could be, from whatever addiction that could be happening, we're covering something over. So I think that's like, let me get interested in that. What is that? Why am I covering it over? Oh, let me go into it. Oh, in there is some kind of tremendous grief or heartache or rage or unexpressed calling or whatever it is. So I need to go into that. And then when I go into that, it informs this action that I take into the world, so that those actions are even in greater and greater alignment with my true soul. So I think it's about a listening, inner listening, and knowing yourself.
And you've got a book called Being True. I think that's the title. And your company's called SoundsTrue. So obviously truth is a big value for you. What does truth mean to you?
Yeah, well, it's not truth in like some sense out there, like, here are the true statements of the world. It's what's true to you. So like you just asked me about integrity, like it's whatever. And I think, first of all, people always know when there's something slightly fishy going on with them. Like you can smell your own fish, your own rotten fish. You really can, and you kind of like, I kind of know it. There's like this rotten fish thing. I think I'm going to put it under the rug in the back room, in the guest room, and, la, 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 and hope nobody notices. But we notice, you know it's there. It's there. So what's true, being true, means, guess what? I put the rotten fish in the guest room under the rug, and I was hoping nobody would notice. And I want to tell you about it, and I want to clean it up too. I'd like to clean it up. I'm going to be true. And you know what else I'm going to be true about? I'm going to be true about what's happening in my heart right now, which is to say, I really think you're a bright guy, Niall. You are. I feel like an old person now that I feel like I'm 90 telling you this, but I do. Like, what's in my heart? Like, can I just say it? Being true is like being true with our BS, the fishy stuff, and it's being true with our love, with what we care about, and taking a risk and saying it, and like letting ourselves be the outrageous lovers of life that we are.
Very cool. Very cool. Just going back to, being able to smell your own fish or whatever, that time in my life when I really did feel out of integrity, I went back to university to do a degree in psychology, and I decided halfway through that degree to drop out to focus on the business. And when I was doing it, I just knew there was something inside me, just knew that it was just the wrong move. I don't know what it was. I couldn't explain it, but just on a gut level, I just knew something was wrong. And I invented a million rationalizations about why it was the right thing to do, whatever. But for whatever reason, my conscience wouldn't leave me alone until I went back just to finish it off. I don't know if that's the guilt or the guilt of my Catholic upbringing or whatever, but I knew I was out of integrity, and I almost couldn't live with myself until I had remedied it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I think that's what, in a way, being true means. It means whether it's a remedy, like I owe this person an apology, that can be part of it. Or here's the thing I really want to do that I've never let myself say out loud is really what's true for me. Or it's having a conversation with somebody and say, there's this thing we've been dancing around. We've never really had the conversation that's the real conversation that we need to have. And I want to have the conversation. I want to bring it forward. I don't want to keep it buried. All of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything that you now know to be true that you wish you had known earlier? And I know you don't like to make these big generalizations or anything, but does anything jump to mind whenever I ask that question?
I think if the one thing that occurs to me is I think I've had a lot of fantasies, or you could say illusions about things, like illusions about there'll be a time when everything will be perfect, and my relationship, my work, the earth, human civil, whatever, a mythos. And I'm thinking of Gabor Mate, who talks about the power of disillusionment. And would you rather keep your illusions, or are you able to let yourself see the truth of things and be disillusioned? Oh my God, I feel so disillusioned. And so maybe I could have spared myself some illusions if I knew what I know now, because I've been so disillusioned in my life. But also, I just think maybe that's just part of the journey of growing older and seeing my young illusions.
Okay, that's really interesting. Actually, I wasn't expecting that. So it's almost like just seeing what is actually happening and not trying to project your hopes on top of it, just seeing the cold hard truth of the situation and being okay with it and dealing with the
Yeah.
pain that comes with that.
Yeah. Valuing the truth more than a fantasy of happiness and perfection and liberation and all of that.
Cool, cool. Okay, well, I've heard you say that Sounds True almost is or has been like a laboratory for experimenting with these sort of like really timeless virtues that have, lasted for generations. Can you maybe tell us more about that?
Sure. Well, I think in a sense, first of all, if you're interested in this notion of being true and living in alignment, let's just say that, it is a kind of laboratory. You become a kind of inner scientist, if you will, inner experimenter, because you have to test things inside. You have to try things out. So it's first of all just trying it out with yourself and being a personal laboratory. And then you get into being in a laboratory with other people. Whoa, that's really interesting. How are we going to do this together? How are we going to set up our experiments and try things? And how am I going to learn from you? And you're going to learn from me. And, you mentioned the notion of virtues, because this is also an idea that I hold dear. And, I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Carolyn Mace, but she's someone that we also work with, That Sounds True. And she's a medical intuitive. And since we talked about this energy running in front of the spine, in her work, she writes and teaches on the spiritual values and principles that are associated with each of the chakras, each of the energy centers in the body. So the virtues actually live in our energy centers. So if we take a virtue like forgiveness that lives in our heart, can we actually embody that at work? So this central channel, this alignment, this brilliancy that runs in us, this river, that river runs through all of our chakras. Can our chakras be open and aligned with these capacities? So you take an idea that sounds like an ancient traditional spiritual idea like forgiveness. Well, how do you apply that at work? It has a real application at work, because believe me, the people you work with are going to do things that you're going to have to forgive. And guess what? They're going to have to forgive you too for the things that you've done or said, or ways you interrupted them or didn't listen to them when they were saying XYZ. I'm thinking for myself, sometimes when people have brought something to me and I'm like, no, no, no. And then they ended up being absolutely right, absolutely right. I missed it. I totally missed it. I was not seeing the situation clearly. So can I forgive myself, which is always the biggest form of forgiveness, and especially in our work, in entrepreneurship and in this laboratory where you're trying things, some of it does not work. Can you be kind to yourself, forgive yourself? Can you forgive? And that's just an example of taking one of the virtues and bringing it into the workplace and really turning your whole life into path. And what I mean by that is growth, learning, the discovery of wisdom, all of it. So, and of course, so much of if you're working in an organization and you love your organization and you're pouring yourself into it, so much of your learning is going to come from that environment.
Do you know the way that there are laws of nature? We have gravity
Sure.
for example. Do you think that these things, some things we're talking about, like truth, integrity, forgiveness, or whatever, these things are potentially embedded into the structure of the reality that we live in, and that the more we can align ourselves with them, and the more that we can live in harmony with them, the better our life can get. I'm not saying it's going to be the cure all to all problems, but it's sort of like the more we're able to live in alignment with these laws of nature, whatever, the better things tend to go. That's been my experience of life. That's why I'm asking. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
I think you're right on. Absolutely, 100%. I mentioned Carolyn Mays, and you said you never heard of her, but that's one of her essential teachings. She defines God as law, the laws of the universe. That's her definition for God. What is God? God is the inherent laws that there are in the universe. So our actions have results, the law of karma. It makes sense. Hide a lot of fish, smelly fish under a carpet in a guest room, your house will smell. It's a law, pretty simple. Yeah, I think 100% right on.
Okay, cool. Tell me about the importance of space, making space in life, and how do you find space in the micro, and how do you find space in the macro?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's just interesting. I notice as you say that, you say the word space, there's a part of me, I melt inside, and I feel a sense of dissolution and ease and, to use a spiritual word, grace. So I love the word space, and I'm not just the word, the experience of space. And space is always available. So that's one of the really terrific things. Wherever you are right now, whoever you are, in the space that you're in, the room that you're in, the vehicle that you're surrounded and penetrated by space. You're surrounded by space. How far does it go? I'm not sure. Can you find the end of it? I don't think I can. Does it end anywhere? To the left, to the right, behind you, on top of you? Where does it go? So can you breathe it in? Can you mix your mind with space, basically? Mix your experience with space and make your experience really spacious. So there's, 75% of you that's space and only 25% that's blah, 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 blah. Okay, maybe we can do 50-50 first, and then we can grow it and grow it. How big can the space be? And the more space we have in us, the more perspective we can have, because that space is an open field of knowing or awareness. And it can witness whatever the thoughts and emotions are that are coming up inside of us, take note, learn, and take skillful action. So you asked about the micro, and the interesting thing is we can always find the space if we're willing to stop and connect with it. And of course, breathing can help us with the mixing. So, I'm going to breathe in. I'm going to bring space into my whole body, the whole interior space of my body. I'm going to mix it with everything inside of me. So it's like your breath can be the action of the mix master, if you will, or whatever you want to call it, the blending machine. And then you breathe out all the things you've been holding on to that feel crammed inside of you, that are making you feel like you're in a vice of some kind of your own making. Just breathe them out into space. Where are they going to go? There's a lot of room for them to go and dissolve.
That's fascinating. And I could see that just being such a helpful thing for people to dive deeper into, just the exploration of space, in around outer. With your business, Tami, I'm aware you do things like you have a 1 minute meeting of silence before meetings and things like that. Are there any other unconventional business practices that have kind of served you and your organization well over the years that other people might not be aware of or do?
Yeah, I mean, you can have different what you want to call them, practices or things that we do or different, but I think the core idea, and I wish it happened more in business, is to really be truthful with people. People love the truth, actually. It's the thing they're looking for. And I found people can be really mature, even when there are downturns or bad things that happen, and that the things that mess with people is when they can't figure out what's going on. What's really going on here? What's actually happening here? I don't get it. Whereas if you can just tell people, this is what's actually going on, this is what we're doing, these are our struggles. And so I know that sounds very basic and you're like, what? But I think that is a core idea. Now, here's something I'll talk about personally. So this is not like, oh, this is a business practice, but this is something personally that has been a big shift for me, which is about 10 years ago, I was working with a coach. And he said to me, Tami, there's so many ways you inspire people, but, it's hard for people to get you to say something really positive and affirming to them personally about their work. Like, you have such high standards that you don't compliment people very often. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to just compliment people for nothing, like blah, blah, blah. And he was like, but people need that. People need to hear positive praise for their work. And he's like, it doesn't cost you money and it gives people so much. Why don't you start doing it more? And of course, this made a lot of sense to me. And I had to ask myself why I didn't do it more. And that took me on my own investigation of the ways that I am very demanding and have really a high bar with myself. And so it's not easy for me historically. It hasn't been easy for me to give myself a compliment. So I'm not going to give other people, it's like, well, okay. So I went through this whole, and then I took a moment and I made a vow, which is a strong statement. Like, now I'm bringing in spiritual language again, but I needed to do something strong with myself internally. And I said, every time it occurred to me that somebody did something impressive, amazing, cool, worthy of a compliment, something that I valued, I would say it out loud, or I'd write them a text, or I'd send them an email, and I would acknowledge it. So I started doing that every single time. So anytime something, it could be little, it could be something like I could tell that somebody struggled in a meeting to speak up, and they did speak up, and they said something that was difficult for them, and it shifted the way the conversation went. Then I would go on a walk afterwards and I'd think about it. And I mean, I didn't mean to think about it. It just occurred to me in space. And then afterwards I would sit down and I would text them a note. I want to thank you for having the courage to bring that up in the meeting. And that totally shifted my relationships with other people at work. And so I'd put that in the category of the power of praise.
Wow. From my own perspective, if I admire somebody and I get praise from them, like, even though I try not to sort of be validated by others, for whatever reason, whatever way I'm wired, I find that hugely motivating for me. It gives me such a lift. Like, if I'm playing sport or whatever, and someone encourages me, like I'm playing a game of football, like, it gives me like an extra spring in my step, So why not? It's free, and if you're telling the truth at the same time.
Exactly. It was a huge missing part of my own leadership. And I was like, well, I'm not going to go around and just, throw compliments left, right, but I didn't have to. I just had to start looking for it and then acting on it. And it became a snowball. That's the interesting thing. Then it started happening all the time. I started noticing all these things I appreciated and writing them. And, now it's just part of my way of interacting with the world.
So I've got an assistant. We've been working together for maybe, it's probably been about 2.5 years now. And we have a weekly meeting. And at the start of the meeting, we basically, what I do is throughout the week, I'll note down all the things that I have appreciated about her work that week, everything I'm grateful that she's done. And there's a list, maybe it's probably between 5 and 10 points. Sort of the meeting, I'll tell her all the things that I've really appreciated. And like you say, you're just, because you have this practice, you're on the lookout for these things, and you just realize, oh my God, this person is bringing so much to my work. Like, I've been really, just a shout out to Lolly, by the way. She's absolutely incredible person. She doesn't get any attention for what we do, but this thing wouldn't run without her. So I'm deeply grateful for that. But
and interestingly, just to say, because you asked about practices, at our leadership team meetings, we would always end our meetings with an open round of appreciations. And here's the interesting thing: only if you mean it. So some meetings, the round of appreciations would go on for like 15 or 20 minutes. People had so much to say about each other. You got 11 people in the room appreciating and some meetings, nothing would be said. Nothing. There wasn't anybody. It's been a hard week or whatever. And people were just, because to me, the important thing is that it's real. Because as soon as it starts becoming, of course, just like, oh, we're supposed to do this, and it becomes like the right thing to do, it doesn't hold any value anymore. But if you keep it open, that they're authentic things, then a round of appreciations at the end of a meeting, it's meaningful.
for sure. Now, another thing that I think is really important to bring up here when we're talking about business: no money or no margins, no mission, right? People have very complex beliefs around money. A lot of it's tied to childhood, like early upbringing and things, and particularly people that are inclined towards helping others. I don't know why that is, but people have a complicated relationship with money. So something I wanted to ask you was, are there any beliefs you hold around money that serve you well, or any ways you look at money, your relationship with money, that you find beneficial in the business world?
Yes, Niall. I've done a lot of work on this issue, and recently. And one of the things I discovered was holding me back. And I think that it's simply a false notion. And in economics, it's called the zero-sum fallacy. And it means looking at money and the availability of money like it's a pizza pie, which means if I have a bigger piece, you get a smaller piece. And unfortunately, I believed this notion around money for quite some time, that if I made more money, it meant someone else was somehow making less. And as somebody who's taken these bodhisattva vows, probably not just in this lifetime, they feel so deep inside my being. And, the bodhisattva is the person who's determined to bring benefit to other people. I didn't want to have more than other people if I was taking something from someone. I mean, that goes against my spiritual nature. That's not okay. But what if money is not like a pizza pie? What if I get a bigger piece, and that's not taking anything away from anybody, because actually they can just print more money, and they do all the time. And instead, it's giving me more flow that I can share with more people. What if money is a positive flow that I can partner with to be even a more gold-filled instrument of goodness in the world? And I'm the opposite of taking things from people. I'm becoming a more powerful river of good flow. And so this is a huge shift. And I think that it's really important for people who want to be benevolent to seek out and see if they have this zero-sum fallacy working in their psyche.
That goes deep. So just to sort of clarify the way you look at it now, you look at it like it's flow, and the more you can be, or more of that flow you can have, the more you can contribute to the world, and the more that you can create a bigger pie for everybody, as opposed to just being at this one limited pie.
There's not a pie. The whole notion of the pie is part of the problem. It's like saying space is a pie. No, space is not there's not a pie of space out there. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's the thing. It's more like, oh, the more that of this current/currency river, the more that this currency flows through me, the more I can share and give, and it comes through me freely, not in some like personal billiard ball kind of way, but as a vehicle and vessel of creative input and creative output. And I'm not quite the opposite of taking from people. I'm an overflow giver.
Okay. I love that. I think images are so powerful for people, and that's a great image, So thanks for sharing that. How far ahead do you plan, Tami?
Not very.
Can you are we talking
Are you talking? Well, okay. So in our business, we have a 3 to 5 year operating plan. We have a plan for how we're going to allocate capital, and that has to get continually reevaluated. But sort of personally, for me, the reason why I said I don't plan very far ahead is in my own kind of like world and thinking about where am I putting my energy, whatever, I can only really think about a couple weeks at a time. I'm like right in whatever it is I'm doing right now with my energy and intensity. But of course we have, we've mapped out 2024. We have our budget already at SoundsTrue. We have a plan for the next few years as well. So they're both true at the same time.
Cool, cool. If you're writing the autobiography of your life, what is the title of the current chapter?
Let die what needs to die, so what can be born can be born. I know it's kind of heavy. It's a heavy autobiography. It's not going to be, light reading for the masses, but there you go.
What's the title of the book?
Being true.
Being true. Okay.
No, what were you going to say?
Existential struggle or something, or I don't know.
No, I would hope not. I would hope it would be something like about not existential struggle, but the discovery of possibility.
Which you could maybe argue is only possible through that existential struggle, though, as well.
That has been true in my life.
What for a young person listening to this, and they're maybe looking for a bit of direction, what do you see as worth aiming for in a human life? What would make for a good direction? What would be a worthwhile existence?
Well, I think the first thing is you need to decide that, oh, young person. Don't listen to anybody else. I mean, look what the people around us are doing with the world. I mean, crazy. Don't listen to me either. Find out for yourself. And what I mean by that is, what would make it worthwhile for you, person? What would it be? Having 10 children? Would it be being a farmer? Would it be being an artist, a sculptor? Would it be writing? What is it for you? And it's so personal. And that's why I'm answering your question that way, because I think often we look out and we're looking for these great ideas and, okay, finally, I listened, blah, 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 and now I know the recipe. Well, the recipe is find out what matters to you. And you have to tell the truth about it. You know what I mean? You have to tell yourself the truth. Like what really matters. I mean, for example, my relationship is so important to me. Okay, that's me. That's me. My marriage is so important to me. It's the centerpiece of my life. I don't necessarily think that's true for other people. In fact, I know for plenty of people, that's not true for them at all. They're single and that's their thing, even into their adulthood, and they're surrounded by, so I'm thinking of someone surrounded by a circle of close friends, and that's their meaning constellation for them. But that's not my meaning constellation. I needed this deep, committed, soulful marriage to be the center point of my heart because of who I am and what I'm doing in this life, and the healing that I'm doing and the creation that I'm doing, and because of this destiny I have with this particular woman. So I guess what I would say to each person is figure out the pathway into your own deepest chamber of your heart. Do you know how to get there? Figure out how to get there. And we all know how to get there because it's in us. So it's about relaxing into it. Be okay with whatever the answer is. Whether the status quo says, we love it, or the status quo says, excuse me, what? What is that? Like, you're going to be, broke and unhappy and, whatever. Whatever your dream might be. It doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. Because if it aligns, if it's the actuality of what's in that deep chamber, that's what matters. That's what matters. It's the only thing that matters, because that's your own congruence inside. And so find that thing that's in your own deepest chamber and honor it and do that regardless of what the world says, and be patient. Play a really long game with it. And, what sounds true, I've been at this for 38 years. That's a long time. When I started meditation, yoga, that was like something that Hare Krishnas did or something. It was not like the mindfulness movement. We have the neuroscience to prove it, no. Now we're part of the well-being movement. No, it was like some weird niche thing. People in my family did not appreciate it. It didn't look Jewish, quote unquote, which is the faith I was born into. I dropped out of college. On top of that, I'm a lesbian. I don't want to have kids. I mean, there was a lot that did not fit the success profile that I could have been living into. But I knew that I had to, quote unquote, stay true. So that's what I would say to a young person. Stay true to yourself.
Those are extremely wise words. And I don't know why this is coming to mind, but it's sort of feeling, I suppose, true for me right now. But yesterday I was sitting at lunch and I'm working at I've recently moved to Dublin in Ireland, right? I'm working at a co-working space, and the conversation about God came up, right? And just very randomly, a person asked me, we're in like a social setting, and a person asked me, "Do you believe in God?" And I think in the past I would have just been like, I would have been very socially conscious and tried to give like a cool answer. And then I just thought, I do. I just said like, yeah, 100% I do. And I didn't feel any embarrassment about it or whatever, but it was just like, it was true for me in that moment. And I just said it, and it felt really good not to need the validation from the outside. Does that make sense?
Of course. Of course.
So just wrapping up here, Tami, with regards to the things people can do after this conversation. Like we've talked a lot about business, about spirituality and things. You have an amazing program you've created called the Inner MBA. Can you maybe tell us about where people can learn more about this, what they might learn on the course, and yeah.
Well, I mean, first of all, I would encourage your listeners to check out SoundsTrue.com, because at SoundsTrue.com, there's 3,000 programs that we've made. There's also the free podcast that I host that has now close to 1,000 conversations with spiritual wisdom teachers. It's called Insights at the Edge. And then the Inner MBA is a specific 9-month immersion program, bringing inner wisdom skills to business. And specifically, we work on, in the first trimester, learning the art of self-management. How do you become a quote unquote mindful leader yourself? And then in the second trimester, it's all about creating exceptional teams and everything that goes into collaboration and deep listening, and also the deep expression of our power and agency at work. And then the final trimester is re-envisioning our organizational life and the contribution of business to society.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, we'll link to that in the show notes for this episode. Tammy, I want to say thank you so much for your time today. You are definitely a person of high integrity. I'm sure of that. So I really appreciate it. And I want to wish you the best going forward.
Thank you. And I want to take a moment, Niall, just to say you did your homework and you shared a bit about yourself, which I really appreciate. And I feel connected to a different part of the world through you and to a younger generation that you fill me with a sense of hope and how sincere you are. And I feel your light. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Tammy. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the show. If you'd like to hear the full version, you can do so with the Weekend University Premium membership. This gets you access to our mastered library of over 5 years of psychology conferences, including over 230 talks and interviews with the world's leading psychologists, professors, and authors, unlimited CPD certification, transcripts, quizzes, premium passes for our annual conference, online courses with Richard Schwartz and Deb Dana, and more. The cost is £97 for 1 year, which breaks down at around 27p per day. The best bit is you can try it out for 30 days completely risk-free, as all orders come with a 100% money-back guarantee. If you're interested, please go to twmembers.com for more information.